got good news and I've got bad news. The bad news is Elm doesn't have for loops. You don't have while loops. You don't have loops of any kind. The good news is you don't need them. So in this video, I'm going to introduce you to some common functions from the list module that you're going to be using in place of where you'd normally use a for loop. So let's take a look at some lists in Elm and start getting familiar with some of the functions that we can do on those lists. So I've got just, a list of names here. You can see this is strings are what's going inside of here. I've got Ryan, I've got Scott, I've got Alexa. I want to introduce you to some of the most popular functions that you're going to use from the list module. So if I wanted to get the lengths of the names, we saw this a little bit in the other video. What I can do is I can use the list.map function, and I can take in all those names that I have defined up here, and I can say take those names, and I want to use list.map to run them through some type of function. So to string length. Fortunately for us, string.toLength or string.length already exists, and as you can see from this suggestion, it's going to take a string and turn it into an int. So at the end of this, instead of having a list of strings, we're going to have a list of integers. So here, we're going to have names, which as we see from the type definition above, names is a list of strings. And then when we're done running it through list.map, we're going to get a list of integers back. So let's see if that works. I'm just going to open up this terminal here. Oops. Main. That was weird. All right, import main. Cool. So main.lengths. So we do main.names. We get Ryan, Scott, and Alexa. That's a list of strings. And then if we do main.lengths, names, we're going to get 4, 5, and 5. And that's because we took our names and then we got the lengths for each thing. So 4, 5, and 5. So what list.map does is it allows us to, do all kinds of things. We can say, I'm going to run, I've got a list of integers when I'm done with this. Maybe I want to run those through, the double function. I'm going to just kind of do an inline lambda here. And what that's going to do is this is going to take my list of integers and return, it's going to still return a list of integers. Map doesn't always change the type. It depends what your function does. So because string.length went from string to int, we took a list of strings and we returned a list of ints. But because a double goes from int to int, let's just give this a name so it's easier to talk about. Double goes from int to int. When we give it a list of ints, it's still going to return a list of ints. So here, this, we're going to have, we're just going to call this example. And then example is still going to return a list of ints. So as I import main, I could say main.example. And you'll see that what it did is it took, let's just take a look at this number 8. So it took Ryan, it got the length of Ryan, which was 4, and then it doubled it, which turned it to 8. So it did that for every single element in the list. And that's what list.map does. It goes through each item and it's going to run this function on each item as if we had called string.length on Ryan, and we typed all this stuff over and over again. So list.map saves us some typing, and it also makes things possible in a more dynamic way. So this is the same thing as doing this. So take all the names, here, let me do this. Take all the names, run them through string.length, run them through double. That's the exact same thing as taking all these names, putting them in here, and then running them with list.map. So this is the same as this. So pick which one you like. For a list where you don't know the size, this isn't possible to do. So that's why we use list.map. Maybe your list is coming from a database or something. So that's the map function. Map never changes the length of the list. So you'll notice that we still have 3 values here. But if you want to filter out certain values, you can use a function called list.filter. So let's take let's take this and let's filter out the values that are, less than 10. So we'll make a function called less than 10. Filter is never going to change the return type, but it will potentially reduce some of the elements in that list. So if I have an int, and I have some number, I'm going to return true if that number is less than 10. That's what this function is going to do. So we're going to take Ryan, we're going to take Scott, we're going to take Alexa, and actually filter is going to keep the items that are less than 10. Sorry, I was misspoke there. So when I do main.example, oops, we're going to return a Boolean here. When I use a filter is going to take in a function that works on a element in that list, and it's going to return true if it should keep it, and it should return false if it shouldn't keep it. And because we're returning this Boolean directly, it's returning true if the number is less than 10 and false if the number is greater than or equal to 10. So I think in this list, we're going to see all these things. I'm going to get rid of this so that we can see which names are sticking around. And so instead of taking in an int, our example is still going to have a list of strings. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a name, and we're going to return if the string.length for that name is less than 10. So this will keep all names that are less than 10 characters long. But if we added, a bunch of characters to Scott's name, so we said Scott, blah, 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 that's going to be more than 10 characters. So when we run that filter, it's going to filter out Scott's name. So the filter function, let's take a look at actually some of these docs. I'm going to make myself tiny. Try to make myself tiny. There we go. This is the Elmland VS Code plugin, and it has the ability to see documentation in the editor, which is nice. So here's an example from the Elm core package of the filter function. And then earlier we had the map function, right? So this was what we were talking about with map. So I'm going to close this and make this a little bit bigger. So this is all available on like the core Elm package docs, everything that I'm talking about here. Map applies a function to every element in a list. So if we want to get the square root of all these things, we can do list.map square root and then give it a list. And that'll take the square root of all these numbers. If we want to use not to flip all these Booleans, we can do that too. And just like we said earlier, it's the same as running a function on every single thing. What we're looking at now is we're looking at filter. So filter keeps elements that satisfy some type of test. So our test was less than 10, and so we were keeping elements that were less than 10 characters long. And so notice that whatever data type comes in is the same data type that comes out, and we write our tests against that data type. So if a list of strings comes in, a list of strings is going to come out of list.filter. And so we're going to end up with, even though we use string to Boolean, it's not going to convert things to Boolean like map did, right? If we used map, we're going to get rid of this. If we used map here, what it would do is it would map the strings to Booleans. And so we'd end up with true, false, true, rather than filter, which keeps the values as they are, but just gets rid of them if they are less than, it keeps them if they're less than 10 characters. So that's map, that's filter. The one thing I wanted to show you, list.length is a good one too. We could take a look at list.length. List.length is pretty straightforward. We've been using string.length a lot. So that's a good one. Let's take a look. Reverse a list, you can do list.reverse. List.member tells you if there's something in a list. So if we dive into this, I can't select text. This will return true if the list contains Ryan. It's going to turn false if it doesn't, contain Ryano, that kind of thing. So that's how we're doing that. And then these are great. So all or some, or all or any are the really popular ones too. So just like list filter and list, just like list filter, you can use list.any, and it'll say return true if any of these have less than 10 characters. I'm going to rename this to less than 10 characters. So when we run this, because Ryan is less than 10 characters, that'll return true. Even if I made this really, really long, because Alexa is less than 10 characters, this thing will still return true. And finally, if I use list.all, this will return false because not every single element in the list is less than 10 characters. So those are some helpful functions for list that you might use. For everything else, you can use like fold_L, or you can use recursion. So an example of when you might want to use fold_L is, let's say I want to go through a list and I want to concatenate all the names together. So I want to take Ryan, and I want to take Scott, and I want to take Alexa, and I want to make it one string. I can use a fold operation to combine strings, and I can just start with an empty string. So how fold works is you take in a string and then you return a string that you want. So this is going to be the name. This is the string so far. What we can do is we can say string so far plus name. So what combined strings is going to do is it's going to work left to right, and it's going to take the string that we have, and it's going to add Ryan to it, and it's going to the next element. It's going to take the string that we have after that, so just the word Ryan, add Scott, and then it'll be Ryan Scott, and then at the end we'll have Ryan Scott Alexa, all one word. So if I run that, what it's doing is it's looping through, it's taking one element at a time, it is adding it to the string so far, and then that new string is going to get passed in the second time around. So then we're going to be holding on to Ryan, and we're going to say, okay, Scott gets added to the end of Ryan, and then we're going to say, okay, Alexa gets added to the end of that string, which is Ryan Scott. And so fold_L is kind of like a way to do recursion. But that's pretty much it for lists. Lists are really good at looping through. They're really good data structures for getting the first element. So we saw a little bit earlier being able to say list.head. So for this function, if I want to get the first element in the list, that's going to return a maybe, and that maybe is going to protect me from crashes if I ever call list.head on an empty list. So things like that. So use lists. You're going to use lists a lot because they're going to be used all over the place in the HTML library, which we're going to see in a future video. But I'm going to introduce you guys to 3 more data structures to round out this section of the course: array, dictionaries, and sets. So let's check those out next.